Welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast, hosted by Dave Roberts. Humanity possesses a unique skill, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. This podcast embraces that ability, offering learning opportunities through conversations with extraordinary guests. Dave aims to leave a positive mark on individuals around the world. So before you dive into today's episode, please share this podcast with your network, including friends, family, and colleagues. And please consider leaving a rating or review. Your support makes all the difference.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, and today it is my pleasure to have as my guest Lily Robinson. Lily is an author, speaker, coach, and entrepreneur whose work centers on healing, resilience, and personal transformation. Her journey has been shaped by lived experience, deep faith, and a commitment to helping others rise above adversity and step into wholeness. As a businesswoman and leader, Lily understands both success and struggle. She brings a unique blend of compassion, wisdom, and practical insight to her work, connecting with people who are navigating life transitions, emotional healing, and personal growth. Her ability to speak honestly and empathically allows others to feel seen, understood, and empowered. Lily is the author of Rise Up and Heal, a transformative book that guides readers through self-reflection, emotional restoration, and renewed purpose. Through storytelling, practical exercises, and faith-centered wisdom, she encourages individuals to confront their past, embrace authenticity, and move forward with courage and resilience. Through her writing, speaking, and coaching, Lily's voice resonates with empathy and purpose. She is committed to creating spaces where healing is possible, resilience is cultivated, and lives are restored with grace, strength, hope, and intention. Lily, welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast. It's a pleasure having you on the program today.
Thank you so much, Dave, for inviting me. This is such a pleasure to be able to be a part of this amazing episode.
Well, thank you. And before we begin, we have to give props to Steve Ramona. Steve is one of the best podcast connectors in the business.
hmm
He had you on his podcast, introduced us. We had a really great conversation. And here we are today recording our episode.
Yes, I think everything that you just said about Steve is definitely on point. He's such a great connector and he's such a bright guy, right? Very smart and very happy. And the name of the podcast that he has is pretty much who he really is, right?
Yep.
Serving, what is it? What is the name of the podcast? Serving with a heart,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is amazing.
Yeah, it is. He has a servant's heart. He epitomizes heart-centered leadership as you do. And I like to
Thank
think
you.
that heart-centered leadership is going to be the wave of the future in business and in anything that we
Yes.
do.
Yes,
So,
I agree.
Lily, my first question for you is please tell our listeners about the experiences that have shaped your life path and your life passions today.
Where do I start? There's so much. And this is something I always say every time I am interviewed. If we didn't go through the hard moments, right, we wouldn't have a testimony. We wouldn't have the power to encourage others. And not only to encourage others, but to bring hope to those people that need it. So for me, what changed me and what really, made me who I am now is all the struggles I went through in life. Losing at the age of 9, I'm pretty sure there was more things that happened before that, but the biggest one was losing my father at the age of 9. And, many people lose loved ones through illness, through accidents. Some of them have the time to say goodbye. In my case, my father was killed. And I was not able to say goodbye, especially being a child where you want to know where your dad is. You want to know, you want to continue that connection with your father, and you still don't understand, when somebody is gone forever, right? They're not coming back. I think that was definitely the biggest impact in my life that changed who I am, how I think, how I interact with people. And so I feel like that's it. That was the thing that really changed me. And that's why I live with passion. That's why I live with so much love for people. And even if we struggle in life, if we don't live with purpose in life and with a mission, we're missing something.
Absolutely. And I think purpose keeps us engaged, keeps us living longer and living a better quality of life. So, but yeah, I mean, early experience matters. Losing a father at an early age, especially suddenly through, he was
Hmm.
killed suddenly. And, grief tends to recapitulate itself as a child gets older. Their meaning of grief at one developmental stage is different than at another, but they re
Hmm.
experience that grief, which is normal based on where they're at in their developmental stage. As they become more able to do abstract ability, they start thinking more about death, what happens after death. But grief tends to
Right.
reinvent itself through the life cycle of a child, right through
Hmm.
adulthood. Um, did your father's absence, how did that affect you as an adult moving forward? Did that have any negative impact in terms of relationships that you developed, in terms of your own self esteem, in terms of questions you had about the fairness of the world?
You know, now that I know about coaching, and the psychology of the human mind, it definitely did. It definitely affected me because growing up, my father was everything to me. He was a loving, caring dad. He would always make me feel like I was an important person, right? And now that I am an adult and I look back at the conversations that we had, I'm so glad that I had the father that I had for such a short time because he was everything I needed. He was so loving, caring, protective, and so tender as well. He never made me feel off or embarrassed. He never, any little question I would make, he would just make me feel like I'm this important person that he would just, you know, create that equal relationship. And not having him around and growing up, it really made me hold on to those memories with him because he was everything, a perfect dad. I can probably say that. And then I grew up with a mom who was emotionally immature. So growing up, even though I felt like I had everything, or even my mom would mention, well, you have everything. You don't have to complain about things. There were moments where I tried to share how I felt. And then she would just kind of flip the story to her and say, well, imagine how I feel. So that's definitely emotionally immature. Of course, she does have a point. Of course, I'm pretty sure she felt terrible. But I think it's important that the emotions of others without imposing ours, right? And allowing that person to express how that person feels. I think that's very important. And so yes, it did affect me, even though growing up, I feel like, well, I guess I am okay because I have a supportive family. My mom is here. She is protective, caring. I have my grandma, my grandpa. You know, I felt like I had somewhat a normal life. When you grow up with parents that don't really address your emotions and how you feel, it could be a little lonely and it definitely affects you.
Yeah, and were you an only child or did you have brothers and sisters as well?
No, I had My mom had a lot of kids.
Okay.
I am the fifth of 8 kids.
That's a big family.
Yes. So I think that's another, issue. And because my mom tried, right? She tried to be there for everyone, but I think it was very tough, right? To part of her was definitely emotionally immature, which we have those conversations now. And I feel like before our relationship wasn't the best, but now we can have a conversation pretty much about anything. And I could tell her how I felt growing up. And, there was a moment where we both cried and she apologized. And I feel like I was able to heal part of that, you know, sadness that I carried. But I feel like the older my mom has gotten and the more she learned, I guess, about life, because for me, I pretty much dug myself into books. I would read pretty much every book that had to do with psychology, with your soul and your body and your mind. And, that was my part of me that really wanted to heal what I was feeling, right? Because my mom, she was an amazing mom. She still is an amazing mom, but she didn't really have the knowledge, you know? And I think it's important to be understanding when our parents don't have, the knowledge to really help you grow in a way that is healthy.
Yeah. And I can also imagine that, being left a widow, trying to raise 8 children, I would imagine that had to be in some way overwhelming for her to try to navigate all of that plus her own grief.
Right? Oh yeah. And I mean, I don't like saying this, but it is true. Unfortunately, in the Latino communities, they don't believe in psychology, right? They don't believe in therapy for some reason. And I know there's a lot of jokes about it. And I can definitely say, I remember sometimes where I tried to share how I felt with my mom, and my mom would just kind of brush it under the rug and be like, "Oh, you're okay. You're okay. Don't complain. Don't complain. I mean, look at everything you have. You're fine." And then I had to say, well, maybe I am fine, you know,
Yeah.
but I mean, that's just how the majority of Latino families are. And, we have to just be tough and just keep pushing through.
Yeah. And the other thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that if a Latino member of any family wants to go into therapy, it's pretty much a family decision that they talk to the family first and then they make whatever the family decides is best, that individual does.
Yes, and this is one thing I noticed too when my father was killed. I remember, we were all struggling. We were all crying and feeling sad and angry because of the situation, wanting to seek revenge, and but I remember nobody mentioned anything about let's do therapy. So we didn't really get a chance to really properly process the sadness, the emotions, and being able to mourn the death of my dad. Same thing with my mom. She never did any therapy.
I can remember when I was a kid, and my mother raised me as an only child because my father left us and then he never came back and I never saw him again.
Mm.
But there wasn't anything even remotely related to therapy or support,
Hmm.
coaching. We just pretty much tried to handle the difficulties ourselves,
Right.
maybe in some way suck it up and
Right.
just keep moving forward. And then, and I've talked to individuals who have come to a grief support group who experienced a death maybe 30, 40 years earlier. And they're coming to a support group 30 or 40 years later because that wasn't available and
Right.
they were still dealing with the grief. So, but the other thing that I also tell my students if you're dealing with a Latino family, is that if you have an individual who's in therapy and they're Latino, you better find some way to get the family involved and communicate with the
Mhm.
family as well too, because families are, from my understanding, are very much a part and a very intricate part of any Latino
Yes.
individual's upbringing and growth.
Oh, yes. And I think based on my own experience, when I started writing my book, they were a little hesitant as well. And they're like, oh, what are you going to say? Right.
Yeah.
It's just a different mindset. It's a different mindset. For me, I've always been different. I've always had this I feel like I've been more, and I pretty much even when I was younger, I would always separate myself from everyone
Mhm.
because I was always very intuitive and always asking questions. I would always ask questions about life and situations and people's behaviors that was criticized, and kind of pushed aside. But thankfully, I didn't care, what my family would say, what my sisters would say, or even my mom. I just kept pushing through. I felt in my heart that my calling was different, right? That my calling was to dig deep into people's emotions and heart and how to become that healthy person, not only on the outside, but also on the inside. And I always followed a path of spirituality and connected with God. And I think that's something that really, it was like a light, just lighting, just illuminating my path as I kept pushing through with my life. And eh, a lot of my siblings, they're the ones that actually come and ask me, for advice. So whatever I've been doing, I want to say that it's been a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, to stay curious, to ask questions, to explore, to look at, various aspects of psychology, spirituality, to see how that can help you grow through tragedy, I
Mhm.
think is great. I mean, once we stop being curious, if we stop being curious, then we need to probably check our pulse to see what's going on.
Yes.
We need to do that. But, one of the things, you described your father as being a very compassionate man, and I'm interpreting this from what I heard, very compassionate.
Hmm.
He treated you as an equal. There wasn't like that father-daughter hierarchy. He was very empathic. It sounds like you took a lot of his characteristics and you have blended that into your relations with your family, with your clients and your coaching practice, and just in general. You've taken the spirit of your father with you and moved forward with that to find meaning.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm feeling emotional right now that you're saying that. Yes, I think I carry him with me, you know? He made such a huge difference in the few years that I had him in my life that, I live every day the way he taught me, to really love on people, to be so in tune with how they feel. How can I make things better for that person? How can we have better connection and better conversations, right? It makes me emotional to say because sometimes you just kind of go in life without thinking. But yes, I do carry him with me. And when our loved ones leave, they're still here, you know? They're still here. The way they used to be, the way they talk to us, we are part of that as well.
Absolutely. And, I believe our loved ones are always with us. I also look at the Day of the Dead celebrations during the, Halloween and All
Mhm.
Saints Day and All Souls Day. And it's very obvious that individuals in the Latino population and Mexican populations, they believe that our loved ones are never truly gone. And that weekend, from my understanding, is where they invite the spirits of their loved ones to commune with them in celebration, in festivities, in meals. And I think for me, I think it's a great way to keep the memories of our loved ones alive and stay connected to the spirit of who those individuals were and are.
Yeah, I became a Christian at the age of 18. And even though I don't celebrate the death, I know that their spirit is with us,
Mhm.
you know? My mom and, my family, they still celebrate that. And I think it's beautiful to honor them and honor their souls. Again, even though I don't celebrate the death, I celebrate their souls and their spirits because yes, they're still around. Their memories, their love. And sometimes you know, you feel them so close even though they're not here physically, right?
No,
But I think it's beautiful. And I think that's what life is, right? We can't just, if somebody dies, we can't just turn the page, right?
no, no,
Because if I die, I'm pretty sure my soul is going to be somewhere, right?
no.
My children, my family, the people that know me, they're going to remember me. And every time they remember me, I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
Well, I see it too. And I think with grief, we're not
Hmm.
destined to forget after a period of
Right.
time. We're not destined to forget, but we're destined to remember. And remembering is how we get through
Mm,
grief.
right, right. Yeah.
So tell me how what you've learned from your father, how does that inform the work that you do with Rise Up and Heal coaching, your coaching practice? How does that inform your work with clients?
So maybe I can describe a little bit more about my dad, how he was. He was in the military and he was even, how some people, when they're in the military, sometimes they allow the military to affect them. I didn't see that in him. I saw a strong man. I saw a strong leader, and I saw a leader with wisdom. Because even when I remember, I am a parent now, and I know sometimes, even if we try not to lose our patience with our kids, sometimes we do. And with my dad, that's actually one thing that I admire. He never lacked patience for some reason. I remember my mom would get frustrated at things, but then my dad would always come and kind of fix things. And now that I see, when I was a child, I didn't understand. I didn't think of it, right? But now that I am an adult and I look back, I really admire how he handled everything with such grace, such wisdom, and such fairness. And I think that's huge. I try my best to model that, to be able to be fair, to be able to be caring, to really look and see how the other person is feeling in their heart. And if there's any sadness or, anything they carry, I think that's one of the things that allows me to be a great coach is to truly come in tune with that person and really say, hey, how are we doing in this area?
Well, what that does is it sends a message that your clients' perceptions are important to you to help you collaboratively work on a self-improvement plan. But the other thing is that they're going to feel empowered, but more so, they're going to feel safe with you. Because as you know, with trauma, and I know you've worked with a lot of
Hmm.
individuals who've experienced trauma, the world isn't a safe place. And it's
Right.
our job to be safe, to create a safe environment, to create consistency, but yet empower them to determine how that structure looks when things are changing in their lives. And it sounds like you do that very well with your clients.
I think feeling safe is everything, right? If you don't feel safe, you're not going to be able to open up.
No.
And I think that is so important. And even heal. If you don't feel safe, you're not going to be able to heal. It is so important to allow the person to express everything, right? Without judgment, without even giving any opinion, just allowing the person to feel safe, allowing the person to process whatever they have going on, right? As they process things, then you're just kind of holding them, right? You're just kind of there holding them, allowing them to process everything and discover themselves.
Yep. And when we can do that and create a space where they're empowered to discover themselves, the responsibility that they're going to take for their success and failures down the road is going to be key. They're going to become self-reliant and be accountable to themselves and everybody else.
Hmm. Yes. Many people deal with guilt. I
Yeah.
want to add that. Many people deal with guilt. And because of that, they're not able to allow themselves to heal.
What are your approaches in dealing with somebody who's experiencing guilt? What if I came to you and said, "Geez, I'm feeling guilty because I should have done more to protect my loved one, from her cancer, or I should have seen the signs sooner. And I was dealing with that guilt. What would be some of the approaches that you would take to help me manage that more effectively?
I think when people deal with guilt, I think they carry that responsibility as if it was up to them, you know? But when situations like that happen, it's not up to you, it's just life. It's how life happens. And sometimes it's not fair. But for us, and I have that tendency as well, um, where we feel guilty, right? Like even when my dad died, I was only 9 years old. And even part of me was like, was it my fault? Right? Like what happened? What did I do that, life had to do this to me? Right. Um, and I think it's so important to separate that, right? To separate how you feel, separate also the situation, how the situation happened, and not take on that burden, and make it your responsibility, because it's not what we do, right? It's not if you did or didn't do that created that situation or allow that situation to happen. I think it's important that we take that burden off our shoulders and say, you know what? How can I approach this? I need to understand that it's not my fault. Sometimes life happens that way. Um, Maybe what I can do is ask, what can I learn from this situation?
Yeah. And you mentioned even at 9 years old, a child will feel guilt, and it's like magical thinking. It's like, did I say something to my father? Did I say something to my pet? Did I treat that my father or my loved one miserably? And did that cause that person to die? And I would tell anybody that I did bereavement support with, I said, look, your words did not cause your loved one to
Hmm.
die. Your loved one died in an accident. Your loved one died in a situation beyond your control. It was nothing you said. It was nothing you did. And, so that's one of the things is to try to take steps with them to allow them to show grace to themselves and maybe go on the path to self-forgiveness and maybe realize that they did the best that they could given the hand of cards that were dealt to them.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned to show grace, and I think that's very important to show grace. And I think it's also part of wanting to be in control, right? It's important that we let go of control, um, because we all do, right? We all do that where we try to be in control of everything and we want to make sure that things happen the way they're supposed to happen. And then we feel disappointed when something else happens that was not in your plans. And I think it's very important that we understand, you know, it's important to let go of control and important to let go of responsibilities that don't belong to us.
Yeah. Yeah. We can only be responsible for our own actions and we can't be responsible for somebody else. Besides, Lily, it's too tiring for me to try to be
Hmm.
me and try to be me and to try to be responsible for somebody else and take on their burdens. I can't do that. I don't have the
Right.
space, nor do I have the stamina for that. I can take on my share of the responsibility for developing that relationship and be a compassionate witness to what they're going through, but I can't take that on within myself and be
Hmm.
responsible for another human being.
Hmm. Yeah. And that's our mission, right? Is to tell our patients or our client when we coach them, to not take responsibility that doesn't belong to them, right? Because that is very crucial for healing.
Absolutely. Um, you mentioned your book earlier, Rise Up and Heal. Now, this was recently published? Was it this year, Lily? It was published.
No, it was published in 2022, I want to say. I feel like life has been after 2020. I don't even know what year I'm living. Um, but yeah, it was published in 2022. And then I revised it just this year. Yeah. Hmm.
So tell us what the book is about. That's a great cover, by the way, too. I,
Thank you. Yes, I designed this pretty much everything. Like this whole thing, I was like, this is how I want it. I want this woman to feel completely free, and so happy and grateful and thankful for life and so connected with God.
yeah, and there's no better way to do that than near a body of water. And water has
Yes.
been known to be the conduit for spirit, for godlike energy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and nature gives us our own sense of peace as well, too. So,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
but tell us about the book. Tell us what inspired you to write it. Tell us what it's about. Tell us what you want readers to take away from it.
So my book is it's not an easy book to read if you are trying to hide your trauma, because my book is all about facing your trauma and not being afraid to pretty much get everything out on the table, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything, in order to heal. That's pretty much what my book is about. If you truly want to heal, from trauma, emotional trauma, childhood trauma, relationship trauma, you know, pretty much everything that's related to trauma, that's my book. I don't sugarcoat things. I share my stories pretty much raw, just the way they are. And the reason why I'm doing that is because if I don't share my own story, people won't be able to relate, right? I'm not perfect. I am a human being with many flaws, and I want people to listen to my stories and say, oh my gosh, I can relate to that, or be able to understand maybe the situation that they may be going through. And hopefully, some of the stories that I share, hopefully they're able to connect the dots and they're able to get out of whatever situation they're in. And the main purpose is also to be able to empower, right? That's my passion, to empower women and men, and for them to stand up and rise up, just like the title says, to rise up and heal and become the best version of themselves.
And you make a really, really good point that if you want individuals to be comfortable talking about their own trauma, their own history of loss, you better demonstrate to them that you're willing to share your history. Um,
Hmm.
one of the goals in my death, dying, and bereavement class that I teach at Utica University is to have my students become comfortable talking about a very taboo topic.
Hmm.
So the first class, in addition to going over the syllabus requirements, they know exactly where I stand with loss. They know my loss history, everything. And,
Hmm.
a lot of times you could hear a pin drop after I talked about that. But I explained to them, I said, look, I said, I don't want you feeling sad for me. I mean, we're all going
Hmm.
to experience loss in our lives. And I found peace with everything that's happened to me but
Hmm.
still honoring the grieving process. But I said, if I want you to become comfortable talking about a taboo topic, you better see that I'm comfortable. The only way I'm going to do that is to engage in some really deep self-disclosure with you that will give you not only a glimpse into my professional life, but more so my personal life and how death shaped my path today.
And really, I think that is the way that we are able to change lives.
Yeah.
We're not able to change lives by being perfect, you know the only way we're able to change lives and encourage others and give them the path of empowerment, for them to carry, I shouldn't say carry, but kind of carry you know their bag of stuff that they have to heal, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
um and that's what I chose to do. I Before I wrote my book, it was kind of a battle because I felt like God was calling me to write the book. And even the circumstances that I was going through, I felt pushed to write my book. And part of me was, kind of battling, saying, well, I don't really want people to know about my life. How am I going to share, what is happening? But then there was that, it was something that happened inside me that thought, if I die and I don't write my book, knowing that I really had that calling to do it, I don't want to die without doing what I was called to do.
Yep.
And so I started writing, and it was not easy. It was painful. Part of my stories was painful because I was also healing as I was writing. And so maybe God empowered me to say, I'm going to do it. There's always going to be people criticizing. There's always going to be, there's always going to be something, right?
Yep.
And so as long as I step into my path and push forward with my calling, I know I'm going to be doing the right thing. And I know I'm going to be touching lives, because if this is what God is calling me to do, I'm going to do it. I don't ever want to die, right? Without saying, or I don't want to die and say, shoot, God gave me all these talents and God gave me this, things to do. And I didn't do it because I was afraid. I don't want to be that.
No, and I mean, it's when we go back and revisit our trauma, write about it, yeah, it's painful. But, at the same time, we can also learn from that. And, we can also talk about the process with our clients. Say, it was painful for me to uncover it, but
Hmm.
the pain was meant to be felt. I needed to experience
Hmm.
that to learn from it and understand that I could get through that. And the other thing is, I think the pain that we experience for that sometimes occurs later in grief for the yearning of our loved ones is another
Hmm.
way that we remember the love that we have for our loved ones, is when we
Right.
experience that yearning that we can feel in the depths of our soul.
Yes. You mentioned allow yourself to feel 100%.
Yeah.
If we don't allow ourselves to feel the pain, we're not going to be able to heal. We have to. We have to allow ourselves to feel the pain, the sadness, the anger, the frustration, everything. Because in the process of feeling that, that's when we're able to release it and be able to
Yes.
heal.
And it's important to be able to feel the pain in a place that you deem to be safe, whether it's a support
Hmm.
group community, whether it's
Hmm.
with coaches like yourself, where you feel like you can be yourself, you can be vulnerable, you can share an intimate part of yourself willingly and know that that's going to be validated and that you're not going to get hurt or judged because of
Right.
that. So,
Right.
and that allows us to feel the pain deeply and to learn from that. So
Hmm.
I wanna, we talked about this before we started recording. I found this passage in the episode notes of an interview that you did with Steve Ramona, and I want to read this to you and give you an opportunity to reflect on it. If I don't heal my trauma, I will repeat the pattern. But if I face it,
Mm.
I reclaim my power. What does that statement mean to you personally? And what are some of the obstacles that clients you encounter with clients that don't allow them to reclaim their
Mm.
power?
Yeah. It's a mouthful. Um, I think it's so important for us to really understand when we're able to heal, and it's not an easy path, but it's so worth it. That's when we basically draw the line between trauma and pain and confusion, right? And freedom. And so when I said that, that if I don't heal my pain, right? When we heal the pain, that's when we're able to change our destination, and not only our destination in life, but also the destination of, in this case, my children, right? When we choose to heal our trauma, we don't only choose to heal our trauma, we also heal the trauma from our ancestors, and also our trauma in the present, and also trauma for the future. And this is huge. This is why I decided to stand up and say, okay, God, I'm going to do what I need to do. And I'm going to be the one that heals. And I'm going to be the one that heals my generations.
Yeah.
Because if I don't do it, who else? Who else is going to do it? You know, maybe my daughter, maybe her daughter. I want that to be me. I want to heal it now. And I want to bring a better life and a better future for my next generations.
And when we empower ourselves to break through the rules that, that governed our generational trauma, we set a new set of rules that'll empower us to step into our truth and our true calling and true purpose. We break
Hmm.
those rules for not only this present generation, but for future generations.
Yes, yes.
Because that'll get carried on. Though
Hmm.
that new way of relating will get carried on for future generations. And we don't even have to alter the DNA code to do that, Lily. It's just going to
Right,
get
right.
passed down. It's just going to get passed down. Um, so why don't more people do that? Why don't more people do that? Why don't more people that they can see that reclaiming their power, yeah, and changing the patterns that kept them stuck in trauma is isn't going to work, and they can reclaim their power and lead a better life and a more empowered life. What prevents them from doing it? What gets in the way?
I think it's fear. You know, I think it's fear. Um, Unfortunately, fear paralyzes,
Yeah.
and many people choose not to heal. And I have to bring this up too. Many people choose to numb their pain through alcohol, through drugs, through coping mechanisms. Many people are stuck in that because they're not willing to feel the pain and process it. They're afraid. They're afraid. I think also they're afraid of themselves, right? They're afraid of
Mhm.
themselves. They're afraid of becoming healthy, believe it or not. Some people some people are afraid to become healthy, and they want to, they just don't know how, or they just are not willing to feel the pain.
Yeah.
And because of that, they just hide in the pain and they numb their pain, and they think that that's better or easier, but it's not.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes people just go with what they know. Any type of change, even though that change might be for the better, could still be intimidating. That can still cause fear. So they revert back to what they know, even though it was self-defeating and chaotic. They're comfortable in that energy.
Right? Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that's a pattern that I dealt with a lot as a former addictions counselor, was dealing with that when they were feeling good, questioning why they deserve to feel good, and then
Mm.
thinking about or either reverting back to old behavior because they didn't feel worthy of success and the old behavior was comfortable for them because they knew how to navigate that.
Wow, isn't that sad? It is very sad because I see a lot of people like that. I even some of my friends and some of my clients, and you try to help them see the truth, right? But somehow they still keep going back to that, and it's because it's familiar. It's
Yeah.
familiar to them, and it feels safe,
Yep.
right?
Yep. And I think too, when narratives get constructed about us, and they're usually constructed by, let's say, in unhealthy families, you have unhealthy parents who will send messages to their children that somehow they're less than. There's
Hmm.
that, and so that narrative gets replayed over and over again, and I think it's very easy for that narrative to become automatically responded to. It's just like
Hmm.
it's effortless. And so when you introduce something else, it can be it's freeing because that's where they want to go in their head or in their heart, but their head is telling them different because that old narrative is replaying back and forth saying, well, no, you don't really deserve to be happy. Just you deserve to get what you got. And those old voices and those old tapes keep recirculating. And I think it's also working on trying to modify those beliefs or change those beliefs so that the voices in your head sound different. The voices in your head become more empowering as opposed to disempowering.
Right. And when we, I'm going to say my own personal experience, when I find some of my clients that are with this mindset, I usually ask them, what is your gut telling you?
Yeah.
Do you think there's another way of doing things? Do you think there is another way to live?
Mhm.
And they automatically they know the answer.
Yeah.
And then that kind of a little nudge, right? Like nudging them and say, hey, there's another way.
Yeah. Yeah. There's another way. And do you feel worthy enough and
Hmm.
confident enough to let me show you how to embrace that or be a companion with you and a compassionate companion as you make positive changes in your life. And for me
Hmm.
to sit here and tell you that, yeah, change is scary
Right.
because of the unknown, but change is also freeing.
Oh, yes. Hmm.
It's just, and that's, I think, as coaches, as therapists, I think that's what we can all strive to do, singularly and together. So, Lily, you've left us with so much good stuff today. I've just been thrilled with the conversation that we've had, but I'm going to ask you to dig into your resources again and tell our listeners if you're going to leave our listeners with one absolute takeaway for today, one teaching, what would that be?
What I can say right now is be compassionate with yourself. As you hear this podcast, I really hope that encourages you to really dig deep into your life and the trauma that you may have. And what I can say is number one, start with being compassionate with yourself. And maybe if you don't know how to start, maybe start writing how you feel. And as you write how you feel, if somebody made you feel bad at some point or hurt you, you're going to be able to express more as you write.
Yeah.
And when you feel pain and when you feel afraid of feeling that emotion, be compassionate with yourself and definitely tell yourself you are loved. You are loved. God loves you. You are loved. If you are here and you're alive, you have a beautiful future ahead of you. You have a mission and a purpose. And I really hope that you believe that and know that there's always a better way. If you're not happy, if you're feeling stuck, there's always a better way. Just be willing to feel that pain and be willing to ask yourself questions and allow yourself to hear the answers.
Yeah. Stay curious. Know
Hmm.
that you're worthy
Yes.
of having a beautiful life and trust yourself and show grace to
Mhm.
yourself. I love it. Those are all
Yes.
really, really good wisdoms to live by.
Hmm.
Lily, my last question for you is if people want to get in touch with you, purchase your book, contract for your services, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can definitely find so I have my book on paperback and I also have it on Audible, which is huge. I just published that. Maybe that's what you were thinking when you asked me earlier. I just published it, just trying to remember, it was in November or December, and it's on Audible. And for me, I'm a person that and I love reading, but Audible has become my best friend because I'm able to read more books faster than just, looking at the paper. Whatever is your favorite thing to do, you can order it on Amazon. You can also go on Audible. Amazon has all versions. It has the paper book, and it also has what is that called? The Kindle version, and it also has the Audible. And you can also, if you want coaching, you can also go on riseupandhealcoaching.com. You can find me there. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on pretty much all social media, LinkedIn. And yeah, reach out and I'm happy to help.
And I will make sure all of your contact information, social media links gets in our episode notes when our episode goes live. Lily, thank you so much for just a wonderful conversation today. I enjoyed our time immensely, and I hope we can do this again in the future.
Yes, definitely. Thank you again. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is great.
You're welcome. And with that, that's a wrap on another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, wishing you peace.